On September 15th, 2025, HYBE Chairman Bang Si-hyuk, aka Hitman Bang, appeared before Korean police for questioning over allegations of fraudulent transactions. In fact, this was the first time that he had been summoned by investigators, police. Now, notice how many pieces came out at once. So what you're looking at, the screenshot pretty much sums it up and gives you a sense of the scale. Like every major and minor outlet in Korea rushed out a story, dozens of articles, all basically saying the same thing, dropped within minutes this morning. Now, so yeah, basically the Korean media is treating it like a breaking celebrity scandal or something. So in this video, we're gonna break down how the press reported it, what some netizens said about it, and what cultural critics are writing in defense of Bang Si-hyuk. Interestingly. Alright, so let me read you an article from one of the Korean media agencies. The Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency's Financial Crimes Investigation Unit called Bang Si-hyuk in as a suspect on charges of violating the Capital Markets Act, aka fraudulent transactions, this morning, on September 15, 2025. Bang Si-hyuk arrived at the Mapo Police Headquarters at around 9:55 a.m., wearing a black suit and clear-rimmed glasses. He stood briefly at the photo line. Yeah, this became an issue, right? Whether Bang Si-hyuk would stand before the photo line, and he did. So he stood briefly at the photo line with his hands clasped and said, "I sincerely apologize for causing concern with my personal matter. I will faithfully cooperate with today's investigation," before moving on. Now, quick note. I'm like, who is he apologizing to though? So, 심려를 끼쳐 죄송합니다. That line, I sincerely apologize for causing concern. That line, you can hear it from many celebrities in Korea whenever their controversies arise, whether those controversies are worth debating about and worth being labeled as controversies or not. A lot of celebrities say that. Why? Because of, I guess, the Korean culture of being, expected to be humble if you're famous and rich. But yeah, nevertheless, he said that. And he also said, "I will faithfully cooperate with today's investigation." So there was nothing significant about what he said. That's something to be expected in cases like this. And then he moved on, entered the headquarters building. Now, when he was pressed by reporters with questions such as, "Did you encourage the sale of HYBE shares during the IPO process?" And the reporters also asked, "Did you say there were no plans to go public?" As he was entering the building. Bang Si-hyuk simply repeated, "I will answer during the investigation. 조사 중에 말씀드리겠습니다." He said it twice before leaving. Now, reporters weren't really expecting answers anyway. They do this all the time as celebrities or famous people, walk away. They chase them and just shout questions at them because that's what they do. Now, Bang Si-hyuk could have just walked past in silence, as most people in his position do, but instead he politely repeated, "I will answer during the investigation," twice before moving on. So I thought that in itself was kind of interesting. Maybe he did that deliberately to show respect or composure. By the way, Korean media's obsession with Bang Si-hyuk is almost comical. Like the way reporters crowd together just to hear him say a single line and then snap a few pictures. It's as if he's an idol, not a corporate chairman facing a probe. I'm being sarcastic here. Now, of course, a lot of Korean media articles at the same time provided context about this case by saying police began looking into the case last December after receiving intelligence. They launched a preliminary probe before officially opening the investigation. On June 30th, officers raided the Korea Exchange in Yeouido and obtained documents related to HYBE's IPO review. On July 24th, they also searched HYBE's headquarters in Yongsan, Seoul City. Bang Si-hyuk's side maintains that he did not deceive early investors, claiming instead that the sales were made at investors' own request, and that the profit-sharing terms had originally been proposed by the investors themselves. And yes, I have talked about this case in detail countless times, so go check it out, the relevant videos on my channel. I'll also attach links to those videos in the description. Now, in an internal company email last month, Bang Si-hyuk said, "I will continue to cooperate fully with the investigation and provide detailed explanations once again. I expect the facts to be clarified through this process and will wait humbly for the authorities' judgment." Okay, so that was the gist of the articles that came out this morning. And again, by this morning alone, Korean media had already churned out a flood of articles on the case. Now, but when I started browsing through them, I noticed something interesting. Like, there were identical sentences showing up verbatim across different outlets. Like the words in bold, right here. 이후 경찰은 지난 6월 30일 여의도 한국거래소를 압수수색해 하이브의 상장 심사 관련 자료를 확보한 것으로 전해진다. For example. And this is a pattern that you often see in Korea when a major story breaks, a wave of near carbon copy articles produced at speed. Some people call it like reporting competition, but when the text is like copy and pasted word for word, it's kind of hard to tell whether the source was an official press release or simply one journalist copying another under deadline pressure or something. Either way, it makes you wonder, even if it's just relaying facts, not that significant facts, couldn't they at least paraphrase though? Yeah, I wondered about that. Anyways, now, these are some of the comments that were left under Korean news articles about Bang Si-hyuk this morning. For example, he pocketed 400 billion Korean won. I heard a 1.2 trillion won fine should be imposed. Scammer, he should be locked up. They should have launched a full-scale investigation long ago. Meanwhile, the company grew massively. This deserves at least 20 years in prison. Total con artist. A bad man. I hope he faces fair punishment. Guess he didn't have the right people backing him. If he had spread some of the 190 billion Korean won around, he could have avoided trial. Politicians treat it like a people's court if their pockets aren't filled. Interesting comment. For that amount of money, life imprisonment. Crack down on corruption among former officials and do a proper investigation. He dragged down Minijin. Oh, okay. He dragged down Minijin and Eugene's too. Life sentence is 190 billion, probably even more skimmed off. Interesting that this particular person brought up Eugene's and Minijin in this case. If this gets swept under the rug, Korea is rotten to the core. Scammer, with that much money involved, he should get at least 5 years in prison. Otherwise, the law here is a joke. Okay, here this guy is being more generous here, giving him 5 years instead of 20 or life imprisonment, as some people would say. His face reeks of guilt. The face is the mirror of the mind. Bang Si-hyuk, ringleader of a stock market rebellion. Greed has no end. You would think he'll be satisfied after amassing that much wealth. He should be arrested immediately. Don't act like you're being sincere. Return the 400 billion you stole. Serve 30 years, then disappear into obscurity. He deserves credit for creating BTS, but I wish he would contribute more to society. Also, acknowledge Minijin's role and resolve this amicably. Okay, once again, Minijin. Although, Bang Si-hyuk has quote unquote return to the society a lot. Like recently, this year, there was a report that he donated 5 billion Korean won, and then he donated another like 10 billion Korean won a few years ago. To Seoul University. Well, so there we go. Context. All right, let's move on. Someone else said he should get 120 years and pay 400 billion in damages. Don't just punish the small guys. Show us result, Mr. President. Okay, bringing up Lee Jae-myung's name. Now, this particular person, YUKK, I recognized their username because last year when I covered how there's some Eugene's fans, and take a note that I'm not trying to generalize here by using the word. I'm using the word some. So some Eugene's fans and some Minijin supporters. I noted how they actively communicated with each other within a certain internet community, within DC Gallery, Eugene's Gallery forum, to try to actively manipulate the general public's opinions by writing comments on various articles. And this particular user, YUKK, wrote a lot of comments, and that's why I still remember this guy's username. And this guy still, I don't know their gender, still writes a lot of articles against Bang Si-hyuk and in favor of, guess what, Minijin and New Jeans. So there you go. Anyways, as always, it's important to note that online article comments do not really reflect public opinion as a whole. Why? Because the people who do comment are a very specific subset, often the most frustrated, angry, or emotionally charged. So, and I think, I don't know, this might be the case in other countries too, but most people in Korea either don't know much about the case or don't feel strongly enough to comment. And that's why the visible comments skew heavily toward harsh, punitive takes, I think. Now, so that was some netizens' opinions. And recently, I don't know if you have learned about this. The South Korean presidential office announced in a briefing that it would establish a presidential committee for a popular cultural exchange. And Park Jin-young, JYP Entertainment's chief creative officer and the founder, was named as a co-chair alongside Culture Minister Choi Hyung. And actually, this is a topic that I covered on my Classic Korea channel, where I break down the most talked about topics in Korea right now. So go check it out and subscribe if interested. Now, when this news came out, I noticed quite a few comments asking why Bang Si-hyuk wasn't given the role instead. But if you look at the pattern, it's not unusual that whenever an article about Bang Si-hyuk's services, his antis and detractors show up in full force. And that public hostility, even though it might not reflect the general public's opinions, but that public hostility may have been one reason why he wasn't considered. Because from the government's perspective, there's little incentive to take on that level of noise or controversy. So choosing a safe option like Park Jin-young makes sense. Or maybe they have approached Bang Si-hyuk and asked him, and maybe he declined. Because there's also the practical side. Bang Si-hyuk is already deeply involved in HYBE's global expansion and spends much of his time working overseas, as he should be, especially in the US. So from HYBE's point of view and from Bang Si-hyuk's point of view, and he simply doesn't have the time to take on a government role in Korea. So I just wanted to point that out while looking at these comments. All right. So far we have looked at the news of Bang Si-hyuk appearing before police and how the media covered it and the kinds of reactions that filled the comment sections. But recently, a number of cultural critics and columnists have stepped in to put this controversy into context, not just focusing on the accusations, but rather on what Bang Si-hyuk's role means for K-pop and Korean business more broadly. So let me read two of these pieces now. Okay? So this particular one is titled, "The Smearing of HYBE's Bang Si-hyuk Has Gone Too Far," written by Ha Jae-gun, culture critic, on September 6th. These days, everyone recognizes how crucial companies are to national economic growth and industrial competitiveness. That awareness has completely reshaped how we evaluate business leaders. Back in the 1980s and 1990s, the stereotype of a conglomerate founder was that of an exploitative tycoon. Criticizing big business was almost a badge of honor for intellectuals and journalists who wanted to protect critical spirits. Yeah, that was the case in Korea, and still kind of the case. But since the 2000s, as Korea joined the ranks of advanced economies, the role of entrepreneurs has been reappraised. More and more people began to see them as central to Korea's growth. Some people even described feeling a surge of pride when encountering Korean brands overseas. As globalization intensified, news that governments around the world were funneling massive resources into supporting their corporations and easing regulations fueled calls in Korea to do the same. With the digital revolution now unfolding and foreign governments pouring astronomical sums into tech companies, the sentiment grew that Korea cannot afford to fall behind. This is why early generation entrepreneurs who built export-oriented conglomerates earning foreign currency for the nation had been increasingly praised. It was odd in retrospect that they were once demonized without nuance. Idolizing them as flawless heroes goes too far, of course, but recognizing their contributions fairly is the healthy approach for the country's future. The article continues. And yet, for contemporary entrepreneurs who have built export powerhouses from scratch, driving a meteoric rise in Korea's national brand, the judgment has been strikingly harsh. Not just harsh, but often resembling demonization. In particular, the founders of K-pop's major entertainment agencies have been singled out. The worldwide success of Korean popular music is nothing short of miraculous. Korea's heavy industries like steel, semiconductors, and shipbuilding were all celebrated as miracles in their time. But the dazzling global ascent of Korean pop culture is the miracle of miracles. It's one thing for a developing country to manufacture quality goods through diligence and efficiency. That's imaginable. But the idea that a developing country's cultural products will be adored worldwide, that was beyond imagination. Yet, the Korean K-pop industry has achieved exactly that. And it was the big agencies and their founders who led the way. Lee Soo-man of SM, Yang Hyun-seok of YG, Park Jin-young of JYP, and Bang Si-hyuk of HYBE. The article continues. To illustrate, in the first half of 2021, only 24.96% of HYBE's revenue came from Korea. The rest was overseas. Today, the vast majority of their revenue is still international. And if you add up the ripple effect, the fans visiting Korea, the global promotion of Korean culture, the boost in brand perception for Korean products, the impact is astronomical. And yet, rather than receiving medals, these figures have become punching bags at home. 동네북. SM was once cast as a root of all evil, with Lee Soo-man practically forced out under negative perceptions. Then YG became the scapegoat, accused without evidence of being behind the Burning Sun scandal, and slammed whether it was said to control artists' private lives too much or too little. Interesting. Now, HYBE and Bang Si-hyuk are the prime targets of demonization. Ironically, the greater the success and the more monumental the contribution, the more extreme the disparagement and even hatred. Oh, notice that this author omitted JYP because I guess they don't really have quote-unquote controversies to deal with or scandals to deal with. Again, that's why from the Korean government's perspective, appointing JYP was a safe option, I think. Worry. Okay. Now, HYBE and Bang Si-hyuk are the prime targets of demonization. Ironically, the greater the success and the more monumental the contribution, the more extreme the disparagement and even hatred. When Minijin's dispute with HYBE broke out, many outlets instantly blamed HYBE's multi-label system. When a NewJeans member claimed she'd been treated unfairly after an uncomfortable comment from another label's manager, the media and even some lawmakers immediately piled on HYBE. True. Although whether that protocol staff said such thing itself is not clear. Although even if she has said it, the fact that Hani talked about it at a National Audit Assembly is still beyond my belief. I cannot believe that happened last year. Anyways, let's go back to the text. Baseless conspiracy theories about cult connections spread, downworld, fueling a wave of indiscriminate attacks against the company and its founder. In such an environment, major agencies inevitably shrink back. Antitrust in their companies is damaged, and not antitrust. Artist trust in their companies is damaged, and that undermines the stability of the entire K-pop industry. Interesting. The bigger issue is that the old prejudices, seeing large agencies only as villains, still dominates. That's why they are treated solely as targets for criticism and regulation by both the media and the National Assembly. Whenever an issue arises, the reflex is simply to attack. And this is really the case in Korea. I mean, of course, fans can get disappointed, angry about the things that happen, and for them, attacking their own artist is not an option for the disappointment they feel, right? So they naturally turn towards companies to attack them instead of just staying still or looking at facts. But the thing is, I don't know, especially in Korea, like this author says, like the agencies are like labeled as just roots of all evils that happen in the K-pop industry, and there are always the targets of hostility and anger. So I really feel, kind of, should I say sympathy for those people who worked at these agencies. And I really hope that those staff and employees can separate themselves from their companies when reading these comments. What I mean is that when those staff and employees who work at K-pop companies, like for example HYBE, when they read comments that harshly attack and criticize HYBE, I hope that those employees do not feel hurt personally. Of course, some of those criticisms could be valid. Some aren't. Like for example, the way some K-pop fans are angry about how their artists are dressed or hairstyle, disappointed by their hairstyle, for example, and then saying that those employees and staff who work at certain companies, they must be stupid or something like that. That's debatable. You know what I'm saying? Okay, I was being tangent. Back to the text. So in such an environment, the bigger issue is that the old prejudice, seeing large agencies only as villains, still dominates. That's why they are treated solely as targets for criticism and regulation by both the media and the National Assembly. Whenever an issue arises, the reflex is simply to attack. Although I have to point out, there are some bad companies and bad executives and evil companies who always try to, exploit and take advantage of their artists. So that deserves criticism, but what this article points out is something different. And the article says, of course, there we go. It says, of course, no one claims these companies are pure good. Just as Korean conglomerates matured over time, improving their systems and driving economic advancement after the rough and tumble years of underdevelopment, so too have K-pop agencies modernized, moving quickly from outdated practices to leading the globalization of K-pop. That trajectory should be encouraged, not endlessly battered. Right now, HYBE, the company most heavily criticized, is also the one most at the forefront of strengthening K-pop's global competitiveness. Bang Si-hyuk, as BTS chief producer, achieved results that will go down in history. He determined the group's concept, creative direction, and even contributed to songwriting. That alone is monumental. But what makes his achievement even more extraordinary is that he didn't stop at one group. He built a system with international competitiveness. By establishing a multi-label structure, he reduced dependence on a single act. Through overseas ventures, HYBE even produced success stories like Cat's Eye, shout out to Cat's Eye and their fandom icons. With such accomplishments, the rational response would be to ask, how do we recognize and support these people? Instead, our society keeps attacking them. We evaluate export conglomerates with both positives and negatives in mind, but with major entertainment agencies, we only see the negatives. Yes, if there are legal disputes, we must wait for the investigation or trial results. The problem is that even before any outcome, the media and public rush to condemn them as criminals, treating them like enemies. Oh, fact. Legal matters will be settled in due time. Fact. Separate from that, we need to properly acknowledge the contributions of these agencies and support them. This is what will strengthen K-pop's competitiveness. Supporting major corporations is considered common sense when it comes to strategic industries. Why should K-pop agencies alone be excluded? Yeah, preach. President Lee Jae-myung recently pledged to build a proud cultural powerhouse and promised stronger support. His chief of staff, Kang Hun-sik, said the Hallyu wave, Korean Wave 4.0 era is opening in earnest, and called it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Culture Minister Choi Hee-young spoke of the 300 trillion won K-culture era. The Korea Creative Content Agency has emphasized that K-content is now trying to leap into the status of global standard or mainstream content, calling for a next K strategy. Clearly, the importance of K-pop is widely acknowledged, but K-pop now stands at both an opportunity and a crisis. The era of Korea monopolizing it is ending as foreign capital moves in. Even K-pop Demon Hunters is a project backed by overseas investments. Yeah. From here on, Korean companies must compete head-to-head with foreign players. That is why, more than ever, domestic major agencies, the vanguard of this battle, need encouragement and support. These companies have the power to lift Korea's overall brand value, and so the nation should back them. Support is usually thought of in terms of high art or niche genres, but we need a shift in thinking. Big K-pop agencies should also be part of the equation. They may look large within Korea, but on the world stage, they are still newcomers, not untouchable giants. Yeah. I recently looked at the comparison of the market caps of Korean K-pop companies and in comparison to like UMG, for example. So there's a lot of room for growth for these Korean companies. Now, the article ends by saying, the miracles created by SM, YG, JYP, and HYBE must be sustained and multiplied with wise backing from the nation. Written by critic Hajegun, cultural critic Hajegun. So, what do you think? Seems like this author argues that basically, Korean society has been unfairly demonizing major K-pop agencies. Not only HYBE, but including SM, JYP, and YG. And their founders were also demonized, despite their enormous contributions to Korea's cultural influence and economic standing. And he, traces a pattern of scapegoating, like noting how SM's Lee Soo-man and YG Yang Eun-seok were once vilified before attention turned to Bang Si-hyuk and HYBE today. And he stresses that Bang Si-hyuk's role as the architect of BTS and the builder of HYBE's multi-label global system is a historic achievement that should be acknowledged. Yet, he points out, instead of recognition, HYBE faces relentless criticism from the media, so this is a summary, and also from politicians and parts of the public, often without substantiated evidence. And that's a problem, he says. He warns that this climate could undermine artist trust and industry stability, especially at a time when foreign capital is moving aggressively into K-pop. And yeah, we have talked about that on my channel. For example, China is investing heavily into Korean entertainment, buying shares aggressively. So he concludes that Korea must learn to support and encourage its major entertainment agencies as national strategic assets rather than treat them solely as targets of suspicion and attack. Interesting. I think there were some valid points, some good points made here. Now, next one is titled K-Demon and Bang Si-hyuk. Of course, K-Demon refers to K-pop demon hunters. Written by Park Young-hoo, perspective designer, on September 6, 2025, released within Financial News platform. In theaters around the world, hundreds of children now sing in unison, gonna be golden. While on tour buses, adults and kids alike sway their shoulders to You Are My Soda Pop. Scenes like this feel normal today, but just 3 or 4 years ago, they would have been unthinkable. During the COVID-19 era, gatherings were banned and the entertainment industry was hit hard. With concerts canceled and venues shuttered, it was impossible to even imagine fans across the globe singing and dancing together the way they do now. At the center of controversy today is HYBE's chairman, Bang Si-hyuk. He faces allegations that he profited while delaying the company's IPO. But to understand this issue properly, we have to recall what the world looked like in 2020. Okay, so that's why the transition kind of sounds kind of dramatic here. The HYBE we know now, a global entertainment powerhouse with multiple labels and international IP beyond BTS, did not exist then. Back then, Big Hit was derided as a BTS-only company. In Korean, they were criticized as Bangtan One-Tool Company, One Tool. Investors feared that once BTS entered military service, the company's future would vanish with them. On top of that, COVID-19 had paralyzed the entire live performance industry. The question wasn't whether to go public, but whether the company could even survive. In such a climate, if the CEO had boldly declared the IPO will definitely happen soon, that would have been truly deceptive. Interesting perspective, huh? With uncertainty at its peak, Bang Si-hyuk instead shouldered the risk himself. When new investors like Stick and Easton acquired shares from existing investors, Bang Si-hyuk personally pledged that if the IPO failed, he would buy those shares back. This was not a trick to deceive the market, but a move to absorb risk and reduce uncertainty. Looking only at the results, Bang Si-hyuk is hailed as a brilliant strategist. But here lies a common fallacy, the K-demon fallacy. Judging the process entirely by the outcome, aka hindsight bias, which is a concept that I mentioned a few times on my channel while talking about this issue. Now back to the article. HYBE did go public successfully. BTS Dynamite topped the Billboard chart, and the company grew under a multi-label system. Yet, none of this was guaranteed in 2020. What if Dynamite had not reached number 1? What if the IPO had flopped? Bang Si-hyuk would have been forced to buy back huge amounts of equity, and HYBE, as we know it today, might never have existed. Interesting. Seen from that perspective, the contract Bang Si-hyuk made was not a gamble, but a declaration of responsibility. He chose to be the ultimate guarantor of the company he built. That choice ultimately led to success, but framing it now as a preordained victory risk oversimplifying history. The reaction from investors themselves supports this. None of the existing shareholders who made large profits from the IPO claim to have been deceived. If Bang Si-hyuk had deliberately misled them, we would have seen anger and lawsuits. Instead, the opposite happened. This suggests that the agreement was not an act of market fraud, but rather a mechanism to stabilize uncertainty. This is the danger of the K-demon fallacy, looking at a successful outcome and concluding it was all decided from the start. But history and markets are never that simple. The success of Dynamite was an unpredictable variable, and the pandemic was an unprecedented risk no company could guarantee against. Interpreting events only in hindsight erases the uncertainty and the weight of responsibility at the time. Today, HYBE has grown into a global entertainment group spanning music, film, games, and character IP. Songs like Golden and Soda Pop resound worldwide because of the risk and uncertainties shouldered in the past. Avoiding the K-demon fallacy begins with recognizing and understanding that reality. To assess Bang Si-hyuk's actions, we should not use today's HYBE as a yardstick, but instead remember the unstable big hit of 2020 and the extraordinary circumstances of COVID-19. The moment we judge the past only by results, we distort history and lose its lessons. Accepting risk and responsibility in the midst of uncertainty, that is the reason HYBE exists today. For this reason, the current controversy around Bang Si-hyuk should not be framed simply as he deceived investors for a profit. Guarding against the K-demon fallacy allows us to see his decisions more clearly and to recognize the value of leadership that accepts responsibility even under extreme uncertainty. And on that foundation, the songs we hear today are not just commercial hits. They are the products of choices made against the odds in one of the most uncertain times in history. Interesting. So this particular article examines the allegations that Bang Si-hyuk profited while delaying HYBE's IPO and places them in the context of the company's precarious state in 2020. Because at the time, Big Hit was viewed as overly dependent on BTS, and the pandemic had paralyzed the concert industry, which cast doubt on the company's very survival. And in this environment, Bang Si-hyuk pledged to personally buy back shares from new investors if the IPO failed, which this author describes as a move that carried heavy personal risk. And the author argues that this was not deception, but an act of responsibility intended to stabilize uncertainty. And in the end, or throughout the article, he warns against what he calls the K-demon fallacy, which he describes as a mistake of interpreting past decisions only through the lens of later success, thus hindsight bias. And HYBE's IPO success and BTS Dynamite topping the Billboard charts, and the success of the multi-label system were far from guaranteed in 2020. And the author says, since no investors later claimed fraud and they all profited, he suggests the contract was fair and protective rather than manipulative. And he concludes that Bang Si-hyuk's leadership should be seen as taking responsibility in an era of uncertainty, and that HYBE's current global position is a product of those risky but committed choices. So yeah, interesting. Let me know what you think about these articles. But I feel like taken together, these two pieces push back against the way Bang Si-hyuk has been portrayed lately. One article emphasizes the bigger picture that Korea has a habit of turning its most successful entertainment executives into villains, even though they have played an undeniable role in raising the country's cultural standing. And the other digs into the financial side, arguing that the current IPO controversy only looks clear-cut if you judge it with hindsight, when in reality, Bang Si-hyuk took on real risk at a very uncertain time, especially during the COVID era. So what stands out is that both writers are asking people, especially people in Korea, to resist easy narratives. Whether it's the media piling on with criticism or the public assuming Bang Si-hyuk's decisions were guaranteed wins, truth is far more complicated. And HYBE didn't become what it is today without risk. And K-pop didn't become a global industry without the vision. And also the flaws, of course, of its biggest players. So the question isn't whether Bang Si-hyuk should be, beyond criticism. Rather, it's whether constant vilification and demonization actually helps anyone. And if Korea wants to keep K-pop competitive on the global stage, maybe it's time to recognize both the shortcomings, if any, and the achievements, if any, instead of flattening everything into a story of heroes and villains. So I thought that was pretty interesting, well-written articles. Let me know your thoughts, though. And as always, let me wrap by leaving you guys with questions. Do you think Bang Si-hyuk is being unfairly targeted by the media and public, or do you believe the scrutiny is justified given HYBE's power and influence? And when you look at HYBE's IPO controversy, which we have talked about a lot, do you see it as Bang Si-hyuk shouldering risk responsibility, or as him benefiting from insider advantages that ordinary investors don't have? Now, K-pop agencies are often criticized far more harshly than traditional conglomerates, as one of the articles pointed out, even though they contribute enormously to Korea's global image. Why do you think that double standard exists? Or do you think that such double standard exists? And if K-pop is now treated as a national strategic industry, as one of the articles points out, should the government, Korean government, step in to actively support companies like HYBE, SM, YG, and HYBE, or should they be left to, sink or swim, sort of say, in the global market on their own? So let me know your thoughts. But before we end, just a quick note. If you enjoy these videos and want to support the channel, you can do that on Patreon, on my Patreon page. Over there, I share extras like full translations of the articles and sources I use when making these videos. And to everyone who's already supporting me on Patreon or on YouTube, or you guys who are watching my videos until the end, I'm talking to you. Thank you so much. Your support really means a lot and helps me keep making these contents for you guys. And I'll leave the link in the description for my Patreon page if you'd like to check it out. And as always, feel free to leave comments. And when you do so, let's stay positive, respectful, and classy. If there's anything new that comes out later today about what he said during questioning, I kind of doubt that anything new will come out. I'll make an update as appropriate. Okay? See you guys later. Peace and love. Bye-bye.